I'm Dale Greenley with the Douglas County Historical Society, and I can't tell you how pleased we are that we had to get more chairs. This is nice. This is really nice. You're all going to be glad you came. This presentation, I've seen parts of it before, really interesting. Dr. Zybach has spent a long time researching Letitia Carson, and he's discovered some stuff up in Benton County that had been hidden away in a box in a basement for years because it was apparently politically incorrect to print out some of this stuff, you know. Freed African American slaves didn't do the stuff she did. So
I gave a presentation to this group 10 years ago on this topic, and since then we've learned a lot more about Letitia, and particularly here in Douglas County. My memory has not gotten better in 10 years, so the first part of the program I might get some things wrong, but I put everything online on a PDF file. So in the middle part we'll be looking at a number of documents. I've highlighted key parts so we can go through them fairly rapidly, but they will be online so you can read them. There's some really remarkable information. This painting of Letitia was just completed this summer, and it was Gwen Carr with the Oregon Black Pioneers commissioned Jeremy Okai Davis to paint prominent black people in Oregon's history. And it's shown at the Bush Museum in Salem, and you can't read it quite across the top, but across all of them he put a qualifying a word that told about the person that he was painting. And hers, it says Homesteader, and that homestead's here in Douglas County, and we're going to talk about that a bit. Here is what I presented before. We had a woodcut. I'm not thinking of her name right now, I will. And we got it about 10 years ago to symbolize Letitia. It's in a gallery in LA, so we had to pay a fee on it, but this is what we used up until Jeremy's painting to designate Letitia, because there's no drawings of her, there's no photographs of her. So this was symbolic, and this is what we used at that time. This was my first presentation on Letitia. In fact, it was the first time anybody had heard of her. It was in 1989 at Oregon State. I was doing research on Jedediah Smith's trail. In fact, I attended a meeting, I think here in the museum in 1987 or 88 on Jedediah Smith, was a national trail promotion at that time. So I wanted to take a black history course at Oregon State, and I was told they don't have any. If you want one, you have to teach it. So I went, and because you're a student, you don't get paid. So I've lived up to that tradition ever since. This is George Abdill, was prominent here in the Historical Society. He wrote an article about Letitia, and it was in 1974 something. So I found that, and I was shocked. It was all about her life here in Douglas County and where she was buried. They didn't know much about her, but after that it disappeared. It was more than we knew, and there was nothing on Benton County. So this told us that she does have a history here. She's buried here. There are gravestones. Now, when I was teaching the class, I was also taking a class with in anthropology, and Jan Meranda was a member of that class, and was very interested in Letitia. In fact, Jan, you want to raise your hand and take responsibility? She's the person. She said it was all right to use the word nagging. For 15 years, she nagged me to, have you done more research yet? Have you checked further into it? What have you written? So I kept chugging along. In 1989, we took George Abdill's work, and we went to the landowners, and they gave us permission to visit her burial site at the Stevens Cemetery. So there's a photograph of Jan. And there's me. I had more hair and less weight. So the story with David Carson was from Northern Ireland, and as a shipping port, we've heard of Irish linens, so it was a lot of cottage industries, and it has an odd history, but we won't go into it. We're going to head more towards Douglas County, but the 7 Carsons were brothers and sisters. We've heard of the potato famines from the 1840s later, very tight financially, very difficult living. The area had been mostly populated by Scot immigrants over a 200 or 300 year period. Land ownership was a difficulty. So 7 brothers and sisters came from Northern Ireland, which had major shipping trade with the United States, and they immigrated here. Meantime, slave trade, this is from 1859. Letitia's ancestors, maybe her parents or her grandparents, probably arrived by slave ship. They may have been in Jamaica because she was born in Kentucky, and it was illegal to buy or sell slaves in Kentucky at the time. There was a Free Frank, and I'd recommend getting the book about him if you haven't heard of him. Very prominent black person, bought his own freedom the year she was born. So he is a free person in Kentucky in 1814, and in 1818 he bought his wife's freedom. Then he formed a town, and now his gravesite is a national monument. It's difficult to see, but that's why I had the PDF files online. But his family settled in West Virginia. Letitia was in Kentucky, and the Ohio River runs through the two and connects up to the Mississippi. So at that time, steamship lines were really prominent, really well developed. You'll notice almost all the workers are black. A lot of the workers on the steamboats are black. They were almost all slaves. There are very few free blacks that did this kind of work. And they traveled to St. Louis, down the Ohio, up the Mississippi to the mouth of the Missouri. And this was St. Louis at that time. You see a black worker in the foreground. That street is famous. In 2015, I knew the name of it. Now this is from Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's a drawing of the slave trade. Every year in St. Louis in January, they would have a big open market in one particular area and sell and lease slaves. A lot of people would inherit a slave or own a slave, and they were too poor to care for them by the law. The law said they had to have minimum clothing, food, housing, and so it was expensive to maintain a slave. And so what they would do is lease them out for a year at a time. So at these slave auctions, people were buying and selling, but they were also leasing, typically 1-year agreements. And so in St. Louis, at the mouth of St. Louis, there's a fair chance that this is where David Carson encountered Letitia Carson. Now, at the time when you've heard the phrase sold down the river, if they'd gone south down the Mississippi, it would have been the cotton fields and horrible conditions. But this is St. Louis, and things were different. In Missouri, they had laws that semi-protected people. So here's a map. You can see the upper part there with the colored counties. That was the Platte Purchase, 1836. In Chicago, they had Potawatomi Indians, and they sent them to a piece of land. They paid the money to move out of Chicago. I think I said St. Louis, it's Chicago. So the Potawatomis moved up into this area. And then Missouri is the only state that became larger after it became a state. The Platte Purchase in 1836 added on to the state from the Potawatomi land. In 1838, we have our first record of David Carson. He was on patrol. And the patrol at that time, typically, when you hear about patrol, it was to gather runaway slaves and return them to their owner. And enact punishments. But at this time it was Mormons. They did not want the Mormons there. So we have records of 1838 of David Carson being on a patrol 2 years after the plat purchase was completed. There was a large migration of white families into the area at the time. The main crop was hemp, kind of like today, but it required slave labor to be profitable. So there were slaves working on the hemp fields. David Carson had a ranch and he raised pigs and bacon and was employed slaves to do it. The law caught up to him. There was a 14-year-old girl that he had leased. The owners were upset and took him to court. In 1844, she said she'd been abused, whether it was him or a hired hand, unknown, but I think he paid a fine or something, and then the next year he got his citizenship. Letitia became pregnant. Whether he bought her or she ran away or he leased her is unknown. But probably when they left, he had a ranch and he had a house in town, in Platte City, and he left them behind. And he went onto the Oregon Trail with Letitia while she was about 6 or 7 months pregnant. And they left from Weston, Missouri, probably. That was the westernmost town in the United States at the time. And even though it was in brand new property, that building there was being constructed in 1845. So they would have seen the construction workers and the foundation at that time as they were leaving Westport. 10 years ago when I gave this, I didn't have it figured out that they probably left from Westport, so I thought they'd crossed the Nodaway Ferry. And what's good about this, it shows how people crossed the Missouri River. It shows the covered wagons proportionate to the river and the ferry system. So those were in different places, and you can see the wagons are going up to the right. What's important about this is at the time, this is before the Dred Scott decision, at the time there was a belief, and maybe Letitia had it, once free, always free. Everybody didn't accept that, but in Missouri, which was a little bit liberal by standards of that time, the idea was that land we're looking at is Indian territory. So they went from Westport, which became the second largest port, the furthest western city, that's where it got its name, or Weston, second largest port to St. Louis. And it was a major dropping off place along with 2 or 3 others for the Oregon Trail. So there we see the very start of it, and there's a good chance that David was escaping something, and Letitia and David probably both thought she might be free at this point. Now here's the first historical record of Letitia Carson. Here's a census of the Tetherow wagon train. It had about 900 people total. I think maybe it was 900 people that crossed that year. It was one of the large trains, and they took a census. And the census, the red lines there, and again, this is on a PDF file online, but it shows David Martin and it shows David Carson. And David Carson was respected. He was one of the people that put together the organizational rules. He was a night watchman. He fell asleep on the job. He was fired, paid a $5 fine. But it tells his wagon, they had 600 pounds of bacon. They had 4 people and 3 armed men. And if you go over to the right column, and they're not, that's why they're highlighted for one, you'll see that one of the people was an adult female. That one is Letitia Carson. They've got 4 weapons. She may or may not have had her own pistol or gun, or maybe the 3 armed men had a spare. The other thing on that line is it shows that they had 1 cow. And that's a really important part of her story. The yellow line up there is Knighton. She bought the cow from Knighton. He had about 30 of them. And that was testified in court right here in Roseburg in 1855, I think. But that cow She purchased, she's 8 or 9 months pregnant, and has testified she did it with her own money. So they had, on the Oregon Trail, they showed these Conestogas. They didn't have those. Those are way too big. They show horses. They didn't have those. Those were way too small. The draft horses came out about 1860. So the Budweiser beer trucks or beer wagons, that was all after the Civil War. They had to use oxen then. Horses or ponies were for riding. Mostly people walked alongside. They carry about 1,500 pounds. I think, I can't remember the mileage on them, but they could do up to about 20 miles a day. And here's the route of the Oregon Trail. You see the name Donna Wojcik up there. When I was doing my research on Jedediah Smith, I got the 18, and then I'll show you the map in a little bit, but I found this David Carson. He crossed in 45. Donna Wojcik was probably, well, she's not around anymore, but was the expert on the 1845 crossing of the Oregon Trail. What you see there in as yellow is the route that they took, and I've documented that with military reports, with correspondence, articles, on a day-by-day basis. So I've got a pretty good idea where their route was. They didn't keep any notes, and nobody mentioned a black lady on the way. When they hit up where Nebraska is today, she gave birth to Martha. So we have a half Irish, half a black slave or former slave having a child on the Oregon Trail in 1845, and nobody bothered to mention it. Now you'll see a little hook up there when it first gets up into Oregon towards the northern part. That goes to the Whitman Mission. So it's quite likely that they took a swing up to the mission. She had a baby, or the mission came down and met the people on the trail. And so we're doing research on that right now, trying to figure out if she had actually made it through Adams and into Whitman or met them there. But it's quite likely that there was some meeting of the mission people and the Carsons. Another thing, the military followed the trains and protected them from Indian raids to about Idaho. And then after that, everybody is on their own. This is the Three Island crossing in Idaho. You can see a series of wagon trains getting ready to cross, and that point of land on the right is modern day Oregon. A major landmark was Mount Hood, and the Cascades of the Columbia. There was a mission there, and that was a gathering point for new immigrants. Oregon Trail was pretty new at that time. So at this point, they came into really civilization for the first time. Women and children were taken by the Hudson's Bay Company, Metis, French Canadians, by canoe to Fort Vancouver. So that's probably how Letitia and the new baby made it to Fort Vancouver. Davy Carson, they called him Davy or Uncle Davy, headed and they said he was an old mountain man, which seems likely. He took the walk-up route over the north part of Mount Hood with, I can't remember, 80 or 100 cattle, maybe more, 4 or 5 or 6 people, one woman. It wasn't Letitia. And they hit a snowstorm, and they were coming near death. The cows wandered off. So David went out to look for them and found, we believe it's Letitia's cow. This is a well-known story. Stephen Stotts told this story, and he was one of the people on the walk-up route with Uncle Davy. He found the milk cow with the bell, put milk into it, and that saved his life. With that, he was able to find a berry field, huckleberries, and people were able to make it the rest of the way. Stephen Stott's story is in the Oregon Historical Quarterly, and it's a pretty fascinating story. So here is Fort Vancouver at the time, and it was a Scotch, English, French, Metis, Indians, the whole mix of cultures, almost everybody was bilingual or trilingual. The main language, the trade language in Oregon at that time, and it was just changing with these Oregon Trail, was French, or Chinook jargon. So between the tribes and the trappers and the Hudson's Bay Company, folks going out and the people in the canoes, they mostly spoke French. So this is when we made the transition in a general language. Oh, the person who drew this, I'm not thinking of his first name, was Warre, W-A-R-R-E. And he was posing as a rich British traveler around the world and taking sketches and drawings, and everybody was really happy with it. And then it turned out later he is a British spy. So we had a reciprocal agreement in 1818, 1846 was a year of decision, 1845, you can't quite see it there, but that's a Hudson's Bay flag with the British flag embedded in it. It was a British management. They thought they had ownership up until Jedediah Smith showed up in 1828. And so here's the fort, and here we got a spy taking meticulous a record of it. These are Métis. They're called half-breeds, French Canadians. They were Iroquois Indian, quite a few of them from the east. Then French men would have Indian wives, and then their offspring were some of the best hunters, trappers, canoe people in history. They traveled up and down the Columbia and other rivers into Canada and carried the language and trade with them. And this is the dress and character of the people of that time. Now the Scottish and the English were more traditional. So here's a square dance. We got a fiddle player. They didn't have guitars then. They had a fiddle player. And he's fiddling music. And the guys there are in their Sunday best. And all the women are Indians. And they've been given Christian clothing. So they're having a square dance, and that's how they use fiddle music. Here's the same spy, and this is Oregon City. This is the main city west of the Rocky Mountains at the time. California was still part of Mexico. And so here's a spy saying, okay, here's all the buildings, how big they are, how they are in relation to one another and the river and so on. So from Oregon City and Fort Vancouver, the red line there shows the route that Letitia and David probably took. Whether they disassembled their wagon or sold it and continued on foot or with other people is unknown. But they did disassemble wagons, haul them downstream. It's quite likely the upper line there comes up from, it goes over the Tualatin Hills from the Portland area now. It had a different name then. And it's possible they reassembled the wagon and took off from there. Another possibility up on the top is from Oregon City, that they met at Oregon City. That's where the walk-up trail ended. And then the other red line is coming down basically Highway 99 to their homestead. This is a picture of the Carson homestead on Soap Creek. This was taken in 1992 or something with an 1890 camera, a time lapse. I was taking the photographer. He taught photography at Lane Community College to different places, and we were trying to reenact scenes as it appeared in the 1840s. So he did a whole showing of these photographs. I took them around about 3 or 4 places, and this is one place. I donated it to the school. He had a nice display at the gallery. He made me pay for it, dang it. But it shows you what their land looked like. The trees, there's more trees than then, but you can see the really low horizon. This is big sky country for the Willamette Valley. This is, when I was researching the Jedediah Smith Trail, he came through with the Hudson's Bay Company on relief to the massacre site on the Umpqua. They came through Soap Creek. So I was doing my research, and this is a 1854-55 map of all the homesteads. The ones in yellow there, 640 acres. This wasn't the United States when these people arrived. This was a provisional government. So provisional claim said a family could claim a full square mile. So the big yellow things were people that traveled with Letitia and David across the Oregon Trail. A few of these people we think they knew in Missouri. I used to know that, but I think I remember that being true. The large red rectangle is right at the mouth. It's the prime land. The Applegate Trail came right along the northern boundary of it. That is 320 acres, and the small red square underneath is 160 acres. And what caught my attention was the large red square says the estate of David Carson. And I've never seen that on a donation land claim, an estate claim before. And then the one underneath says David Carson. So is he dead or alive? And what's his 160? That's a single person. 320 is half of a provisional claim. Well, his claim used to come down 640 acres, and when we became a state, it became illegal for a black person to own property. So the donation land claim is the first Equal Rights Act in the United States, and that women were given title to half the properties, 640 acres, 320 in the wife's name. So a married man could have with the donation land claim after they changed it from the provisional claim, but a black person couldn't, so they cut it in half. He took the north half. And while they were there, they had a baby, and his name was Adam, and everybody called him Jack most of his adult life. And he changed his name to Andrew, and there's a story behind that. But that baby bed is in the museum in Benton County, and it's the first black baby in Benton County. Well, he was the first. That's a really ornate bed. And the people that had it, that donated it, the Reed family, were half a mile away from the Carsons. They were just over the hill. They were just connected. So there is no way, if that's accurate information, that that's the first black baby's bed, which the family has claimed since the 1800s, that is Jack Carson's bed. You can see it's really ornate, whether they traded somebody from it going to the gold rush or not, or whether David himself was a craftsman, we don't know. Here's the census record. Here's the next record of Letitia. The upper line there is David Carson, underneath is Letitia, then Martha, then Adam. They list her as a black, they list the two kids as mulatto. They give her birth date as 36 years of age, which, 1814, she would have been born. That meant she was about 30 when she crossed the Oregon Trail. That also meant that she probably left children behind in Kentucky and in Missouri. So that's one thing we're looking at. The bottom line there is Greenberry Smith. He traveled with them on the Oregon Trail, total racist. He headed the 4th of July parade. He was the lead person in Corvallis in 1862 or 64. He became the largest landowner in Benton County, one of the wealthiest men in Benton County. And according to his family, he was a jerk. He ripped off his brother after he died for his estate. Next, yep. That's him. That's Greenberry. Okay, next one. David died in 1852. David Jr., who was quite likely a bastard son from Missouri, and Andrew Carson, who was a nephew of David, came over the Oregon Trail in 1852. They stayed with the Carsons, and then David died. A lot of people were dying in 1852 from disease on the Oregon Trail that was happening, and it's possible that these guys brought a disease that killed David. He was supposed to be part of the citizens board in a jury trial, and I think it was June or July, and got a leave because he was sick, and then he died in September. So somehow Greenberry Smith became executor of the will, and the first thing he did was to do an inventory and apply a price. This is the most detailed inventory of a pioneer family from 1852 that I'm aware of. When I saw the estate of David Carson, I thought that was odd. I went to Donna Wojcik's book, said they had a black person with them, Letitia Carson, she in the appendix. And I thought, well, she should have inherited something. They had 2 children, but instead they sent in 2 neighbors, and they took an inventory of everything that was there, that was owned, so they could put it up for public auction. And here's the second page. It shows they have a half acre of potatoes. They've got 27 cows. They've got oxen. They've got bedding. This is a complete inventory. So this had to be an invasion of her privacy. She's got neighbors that, she's an old Oregonian. They took the prime real estate. That was the southernmost donation or provisional land claim at that time. And within months or weeks, people settled into Corvallis and Eugene area, Skinner. But at that time, he had his pick of the litter as far as the land, and he took out the best square mile of Soap Creek. And after 7 years, all of their possessions were worth about $1,500. One thing, there's a box of books, and there's a Bible that somebody buys separately, and I've been really curious what's happened to that, because it's obviously a family keepsake. So then when they sold everything at auction, Letitia had to be there with all of her neighbors. She was an old Oregonian. That was a title that people had that came over before it was made into a territory while it was still unknown who the owner of the land would be. And so she had to bid against her neighbors for her own possessions. You see David Carson up there. That's who we think Junior is. He doesn't appear in a will or anywhere else, but he's buying things like tools, and he's buying underwear. He's buying probably his dad's own underwear. That's how far they were selling it. Then you see Letitia's name. She had to buy her own bed. She had to buy her own bedding. She had to buy plates. She bought a cow and a calf and another cow. And she had to pay for it with her own money. So she had to buy her own possessions, and she spent a little over $100. That had to be humiliating, to stand around all these people and have them look through all underwear, everything else, and having people bid, tell you what it's worth, and have to buy it yourself, your own bed. Okay, next. So here's an unusual thing that kind of brings an odd thing. David Jr. is not listed in the will, and we call him Junior because Greenberry Smith called him Junior. We don't know for sure, but when they did the auction, they got about $1,400 or $1,500, and Junior somehow ended up with $200 for a bunch of fence posts and things from the estate. The 160 acres, he put the claim in on that about 2 weeks after David Sr. died. It is looking, the more you look at the details, very suspicious. Okay. This is where the documents are. What happened when I saw there was an estate sale, I went down to the county courthouse and requested records of the estate. And the guy that brought it out, he was an old guy, probably about 10 years younger than I am now, but he'd been there for a long time. And I had to check him out, the files. There's 180 files that they had, and nobody had ever checked them out since 1856. So this was 1889. She had been completely buried. Greenberry Smith was a wealthy man. He got her canceled. Didn't appear in the papers. They had one thing with her name misspelled in the Oregon City paper when she first filed suit, and no follow-up. This is, she filed a suit. A man named Thayer crossed the Oregon Trail. He's about 30 years old. About 6 months before, she filed suit. What happened in 1854, Oregon Territory got a new charter, And they accidentally, it wasn't done on purpose, left off the part where a black person could testify in court or file suit. That had been illegal up until 1854. Maybe Uncle Tom's Cabin, which came out in 1853, concerned people. But she filed suit for two things, or filed two suits. The first one here, she's filing for back wages. She said, I've been working for this guy since 45. Here's how much I should get paid. And then her second one, and her second suit was for the cattle. Here we have testimony that she bought a cow with her own money. David told a visitor who testified in court, well, in a court document, and he is from the Roseburg area. So I don't know if they took his testimony here or he had to travel to Corvallis, but that she had bought the cow with her own money, and David said, that's her herd, those are her cows. She built that up from that one milk cow. So Greenberry Smith had sold all those cows at auction. They were hers, and she had expert testimony. So she got a decision. She got a decision for $1,300. She beat him in court 2 times. A white supremacist beaten by a former slave, a woman in court that wasn't even allowed to testify, and she won. The jury of her peers, all white males. This did not make the papers. Nobody knew about it. Yep. If Greenberry had appealed this, then it would have made the papers. They would have had to put out a public notice. So he just said, okay. $1,300 was, their whole estate was, $1,500. It was an incredible amount of money. So now we're in Douglas County. What happened in 1853, she came south. There's two or...
She got the money.
Huh?
She won in court, but did he actually pay up? Do we know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I think that's a good question, because I think she settled for $700. That was still a massive amount of money at that time. People would work for $5 a week, so $250 a year. This shows some key points. Now it says Gold Mines Road. That's my mistake. I heard that somewhere. Somebody told me, so I thought that's good. And then I got it from actual authorities that no, it was never called that. But it's the Applegate Trail, that line on the left. And you see the South Umpqua River, and you see Weaver's place up there. And again, I've got this on a PDF file so you can see it. Down south is Elif, in between is Canyon Creek. Now, Ford Family Foundation gave me funding so I could do a high school biography for Letitia, which I'd really wanted to do. I've written several articles. I thought this will be easy. I figured about 50 or 60,000 words total. I hit the Canyonville area. I found out nobody knew about Canyon Creek. Nobody knew about the 1850s building and military use in the early 1850s. From Canyonville to Elif's place, where it says Cow Creek down there, where she settled, was the worst part of the Applegate Trail. It was infamous at the time. It was called the Umpqua Canyon. This is 20 or 30 years before the Grand Canyon. It was the first time the word canyon was used in the English language. But it was a horrendous trip through the canyon there. I-5 still follows the same route. They tried to reroute it many times, and they can't. They had to use the creek for parts of it. Wagons broke down, Indians attacked, people died. There's all kinds of stories about that. And then I went to Canyonville to talk to people, and they'd never heard of it. So I added that. And then where Cow Creek and the Elifs, that's where the Rogue River Indian War, Elif was a major stopping point. The governor of Oregon, all the military would stay there. That's where Letitia was. That was a furthest point north of the Rogue River Indian War conflicts. And so I put that in there. And then when that was reviewed by a museum, well, I think he's the head of the Curry County Historical Society, he said, no, you've got this wrong, you need to add more detail. So this 5,000 word draft ballooned out to about 13,000 words. And the high school project got derailed. There was way more information than I was able to compress. and there was way too many knowledgeable reviewers that forced me to add more detail. Over the right there, we'll look at a little bit closer at those in a little bit, but from the Elifs to Weavers with Canyonville in between there, it's possible that Martha stayed with the family, with the school teacher and her husband in Myrtle Creek, because we have records of Letitia and Jack at the Elifs, but no Martha. She was 8 years old, and that was a fine age at that time to sell a child if they were slaves. But 8-year-olds could take care of the baby. People had large families. There's chores to do around the house. They'd help make the food. So I think there's a fair chance that Martha may have stayed north. Okay. Now, Alice Elif was born during a conflict. At that time, it was Fort Elif. And one of the first stories we have of Letitia is she was the midwife. There's another person that helped her about 19 or 20 years old. They list Letitia as her assistant in some stories. But she was there at the birth, and this used to be an important thing, the first white child. And she delivered it. And her son, Jack, was with her. Alice died a short while later. She didn't live very long. And then the people that owned the Elif place, I think still the Johns family, put this marker up. Next. Okay, so here, the Rogue River Indian Wars, I've written fairly extensively about that, and I can make that available to anybody that's interested, and I've got good references in that for the authoritative sources. But you'll see the lower red dot is McGinnis. There's an N-word creek, and I'm on the Oregon Geographic Names Board, and I take personal responsibility for getting that renamed Jack Carson Creek. So if you get a government document now, it's not N-word Creek anymore, it's Jack Carson Creek. That's the official name. So from the McGinnis family, you go north to the Lavadours. They had a claim, Joseph Lavadour and his sons. And then if you take the route, you come up to Letitia Creek and Letitia's property, and then there's the Stevens down the road. Today, that's a lot of driving, but back then, there were Indian trails and pack trails, and this was a straight line. So to go from Guinness's to the Lavadours to the Carsons by horseback, you could go 18 or 20 miles in an hour, so it was an hour's drive. From Lavadours to Carsons, maybe 15 or 20 minutes or half hour at a gallop. Okay, next. And here's what's important. In 1863, Letitia Carson put out a land claim for 153 acres on Myrtle Creek. The creek that runs through it, named Letitia Creek. Locals, you might know it as Tish Creek. It's about 3 miles long. It was the furthest place on the road. They've discovered gold there, and so you'll see a town called Nugget. The mail service was once a week to Nugget from Roseburg. So it was isolated. The question?
Mail from Myrtle Creek. Mail came from Myrtle Creek.
Oh, Myrtle Creek, excuse me. I told you I'd get things wrong. Okay, next. Okay, so here's a picture that I took with Jan when we visited in '89. They had it all gated off. We were told that where the pine tree is there, they discovered gold. This was her claim about 35 years ago. Okay. Then about 10 or 12 years ago, Jan and I and Glenn Carr from Oregon Black Pioneers visited the land again. It had a bunch of locks on it. We tried to get admittance to it. When Jan and I were there, we did cross through and talk to some kids that were in the trailer house as watchdogs, but not allowed on. We had a gatekeeper there, and he kept the gate. He wouldn't let us in. He said he would, but he didn't. So we have never been on the property, but this is Letitia Creek. This is the mouth where you can see it from the highway, or Tish Creek, okay? So this is her claim. John Kelly was Irish. He accepted a claim from Letitia Carson in 1863 for property. The Homestead Act had just been written into law by Lincoln, and she was one of the very first claimants. So there ended up being 3.5 million claimants on the Homestead Act. As near as we can tell, she was the first black woman to make a homestead claim, quite likely the first black person. What's interesting, this is her finished claim from John Kelly again. Now, it took us about 6 months of correspondence and some phone calls, and I think Jan had to come up with $50 for us to get a bad copy of this. And so I highlighted it, thinking, well, we'll get a good copy. We've never been able to get a good copy, so you'll see this in different places, and you'll see it's highlighted. That was done 35 years ago. No, wait, no, this is 10 or 12 years ago. Okay, I think here's what's interesting. She is signing on to this property as a natural-born citizen of the United States. Now, a foreigner could, if they pledged to be United States, they could. I'm going to show you later. I wrote an article about her legal suits, and it was peer-reviewed, and it was put in the Oregon State Bar Bulletin. 20,000 circulation, all the judges, the Supreme Court of Oregon, all the lawyers, the law students, they looked at it a year, nobody noticed this. So when I was working on this a year or two ago, a friend in Portland, who's an expert on black history, said, she wasn't a natural born citizen, she signs as a widow, and I thought, well, that's sweet, she's like a family person applying for this ownership. So it was only, while I was doing this latest research, that I discovered she had no right. Black people didn't become citizens until 14th Amendment, 1868. All of these lawyers, judges, everybody missed it, but we found out. And so she's signing on, and she's got witnesses that says, yeah, she's a natural citizen. That's why she signed as a widow. And it was not true. She was not a native citizen of the United States. So they all knew that this wasn't quite copacetic. Okay.
You said she signed it, so she's right.
Well, what's interesting here, yeah, the first one, it says her mark, and it's got an X, but this one doesn't have that. And the writing is different. We're pretty sure that that's her signature. So she showed up as a number on a Oregon Census or Oregon Trail Census. She showed up in the 1850 census, and now she's showing up claiming land.
Well, it's during the Civil War, so maybe she figured if everything works out all right, then I am a citizen.
I don't think she was thinking that far ahead. Why did John Kelly think she was a citizen?
I think she considered herself a citizen because once she crossed that river at that point, she's like, I'm free.
She was free, but she wasn't a citizen. It wasn't her decision, was it? She is a citizen. This was a national law, and she was not considered a citizen and not eligible, just as she lost the land in Soap Creek. Okay, next. Okay, so she made the claim in 1863. She got final title in 1868, and about that time she got citizenship. In 1884, a man named Slater, and he is a county clerk in Benton County, so he signed some of her papers. He got elected to Congress. So the Slater Act was, has everybody heard of the Dawes Act, or anybody? Okay, the Dawes Act was 1888, and that said that these Indian reservations that white people wanted, suddenly the Indians could get 40 acres, but not the whole 10,000, and everything else that they didn't divvy up among themselves in 40-acre increments would be open to white settlement. So the Umatilla Indian Reservation and one in Arizona were two experiments. The Slater Act said that, okay, we're going to try that out on these 2 reservations and see what happens. So the red line on the left goes up and over, and that hook up there goes to the Whitman map. The yellow line down the side there is the Oregon Trail. So they'd been through that before, but this is a railroad map. So they could take the train in 1884, when the Slater Act came in, to Umatilla, which was, I think, about 40 miles from Pendleton. I got it written there, 14 miles. And so both her daughter and her granddaughter, Mary Alice and Martha, married Lavadour brothers. They both had children right here in Douglas County. But in 1884, when the Slater Act opened, both Lavadour families maybe took the train, maybe drove stock, we don't know, but they went over to Umatilla area with all of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Okay, next.
And all the extended families, the McGinnises and the...
Well, there's some McGinnises went, but a lot of them stayed behind. And Rondos, McGinnises, Adams, that's pretty much the major families. This shows the claims they got there. So they had David got Platt purchased land as a claimant. Then they came and got provisional land claim. It turned into a donation land claim. She took the Homestead Act, and now her daughter and granddaughter and their families have claimed the first allotments in history. So these families was really at the lead of working with the government, and they did that for about 100 years, and for the most part benefited by that arrangement. So these, Uncle Lex is down there on the left. Joseph is Mary Alice's husband. The one up on top is Narcissus. Next. So there's Martha and her husband Narcissa Lavadour and their son Nelson. Narcissus and Nelson died about a year after this picture, both of them. So this is about 1892 or 93. The picture was probably taken in Pendleton or Adams. And people said that Martha looked just like her mother, but nobody said her mother was black. So that's about as close as we can get an idea of what Letitia may have looked like. Next. And this is her granddaughter, Mary Alice, who, this was really complicated. When I met Joey Lavadour about 10 or 12 years ago, we were discussing the family, and he's a family historian, so he had to explain who his great-great-great-grandmother was also his great-great-great-great-grandmother. He's descended from Mary Alice, who's descended from Martha, from Letitia, and that's her husband, Joseph. They lived together 40 or 50 years. He was named after his father, Joseph Sr., that's Joseph Jr. So Joey Lavadour today, I think his dad had a different name, but he's like about the fifth Joseph Lavadour in the family. So here they are in the Umatilla Reservation. Okay, next. And so because her daughter moved away, she wrote a will, and she willed all of her land to her son, who she calls Andrew now. There's a story about Andrew, his uncle, in the Starve-Out gold mine, but and that in the 1860 census, and we think that he had some kind of respect or some reason he took his uncle's name. He left $5 for Martha. She had a family, and that was to make everything legal. So this is her last will and testament. This is the only known picture of Jack, and you can see it doesn't show his facial features very well. He made the newspapers once. He got in a fight with somebody, and it made the paper. His arm got broken in machinery. He was known for his love of horses. He was really good with horses, and he hauled lumber, Myrtle Creek down to Applegate area, and probably lived with his mom on the ranch. There he is with horses and a load of lumber. We had another picture which was identified as Jack, and then the people at Myrtle Creek told me it was wrong, so I don't use that one anymore. Okay. So here's Mary Alice. She's in the middle. They put out a video where from Central Oregon depicting her as a young black girl. She was actually 1/4 black, 3/4 white. She had red hair and freckles. So, But there's the relatives, McGinnises and the Lavadours and the Campions and the Rondeaus, and they're at Starvout. Does everybody know where Starvout is? Okay, yeah. Okay, it's just out of Azalea. It's towards McGinnis's house on the earlier map. So here she kept in touch. She left when she was an adult. She had 1 or 2 children before she left. So she's coming back, visiting the relatives that stayed back here in Douglas County. And here's a motley crew about 100 years later. There's Jan. There's Gwen Carr from Oregon Black Pioneers, Jan's husband, John. There's me. There's Janine Johns. It's a John's Ranch. There's Gwen's brother. He's in LA now. Jane Kirkpatrick is there. And we're all there to learn more about Letitia. Jan has taken her nagging skills and transferred them to Jane. So Jane's there writing a book. Jan's there egging us on. And I've got to tell you, on all of the earlier paperwork, 180 of them, we looked at 5 or 6 of the keys. I am really bad at cursive writing. John is good at reading it. Jan is a good typist. They made those copies and transcribed all of those documents. We put them online. The link broke. During the pandemic, a graduate student at Portland State was doing her research on Letitia, on the legal thing, and the link had broken, so she had to go back and look at all those original documents herself, the cursive writing. It's all, because it's all online, but she was the one that alerted me. She said, these should be transcribed. And I went, what? Oh, the link broke. But that was a major part of work, and a major part of my research, and also Jane Kirkpatrick's was the transcribed documents. Okay,
So
next.
Is Jane Kirkpatrick writing a book then?
We're coming up. Okay, so from there, this is Jack's house. He sold, his mom died in 1888, about 1891 or 92. He sold the property. The people that bought it struck gold, literally. And so you got nugget there. Jack took his money, he moved into Myrtle Creek, and he built this house. Canyonville. I'm sure glad people know what they're doing here. In Canyonville, that's his house. And the people that own it now owned it then and let us in and photograph it and everything. So that was part of our visit that was really nice. And I kept completing Canyonville with Myrtle Creek when I'd come back and I'd drive up the wrong road. If I did that now, I'd blame it on age, but then I had no excuse. I just wasn't, that's why I thought this is Myrtle Creek, I think. Okay, next. Then we went to the graveyard. This is about 2014, 2015, somewhere through there. And it had not changed since Janet had been there in 1989. I think I'd maybe come one time in between on it, but the whole group went there. Next. And there's Gwen Carr, Oregon Black Pioneers, and Jane Kirkpatrick, and Letitia's grave. It was a very special moment. Special visit, special day. Okay, next. It was so special the newspaper did an article about it. There I am at the gravesite. I'm with the photographer, and you'll notice they're announcing the 2015 presentation I'm going to give to the Douglas County Historical Society, and they charged everybody $15 then. So that changed. Well, I didn't get it. I think the Historical Society got it. Okay, next. Okay, so this is Jane's book, and it went into a second printing. It's been translated into at least 1 or 2 other languages. It's got a very nice section in the back appendix, like 2 or 3 pages, about the work that Jan and I have done to make this book possible. Okay, next. And at the same time, Oregon Websites is it's a nonprofit 501c3 that I co-founded in December ‘96. So in 2014, this is entirely for kids. We put up a Letitia Carson web page, and we have all of the documents and Jan's transcriptions, photographs, everything you've been seeing here has been on that website and freely available, but incrementally. This is how the student did her research. And it was Alison Saar was the artist I forgot earlier. This is her woodcut. And Jane paid, I think, $150 or something, so we have permission to use it for the website. Okay, next. For a Facebook page, the Friends of Letitia Carson, it's still there. Occasionally, one of us puts something up. I think Jane just put something up. There's an announcement of the presentation that's going on. There's Saar's woodcut. There's War's picture of the Metis, because her family and the Lavadours, those were her social circle. Okay, next. And so there's those are members here. I wrote I think three parts for the Oregon, for the Douglas County Historical Society, a three-part series of articles, and it was written in 4 parts, and I think the Genealogical Society put it out in 4 parts. But at each one I asked questions. Who knows this about this? Who knows an answer to that? And for each one of the 4 parts I added 3 questions. So I had 12 questions, and out of those 12 questions I got 0 responses. Everybody knew as much about that as I did. Nothing. Okay, and here's what it appeared in the Douglas County Pioneer, as I think it was 4 parts in the Pioneer and 3 parts in the Trapper. Okay, next. And here's the article I wrote for the bar, and it's got an interesting title: "Strangely Absent from History." And that was the title of the editor. The editor retired. He's an editor there for like 20 years or longer. This was one of the last things he did. And it was mentioned by the Oregon Supreme Court Justice in a letter to the editor of the next magazine, saying he'd read it and really enjoyed it. He was impressed. He didn't usually read their own magazine, but he was on an airplane and really liked it. And out of all of that, not one of them noticed that she wasn't a citizen and had no right to make a homestead claim. Okay, next. Okay, so that was the last slide in 2015. And my great-granddaughter just been born. I've been trying to get a girl in the family for over 40 years. 2 sons, a grandson, and then they took a sonic thing and they said, it's going to be a girl. And I said, she's going to be spoiled. And so that's how I ended the program 10 years ago. It's like this story needs to go on to future generations. It needs to be spread. This is a really historical woman, a real hero. And we've got to spread these stories to our kids. Okay, next. So what's happened since then, and this is the last 10 years, the Letitia Carson Legacy Project came out of Oregon State. Oregon Black Pioneers is involved. NAACP was involved. They put together a website. They have an annual meeting now. They had their first last year at the homestead. They've had several gatherings. So they took most of the materials from our website and built a archival website that was specific for researchers. So this went online. Next. And I think it was Zachary Stocks wrote this. Letitia's history made the Oregon Encyclopedia. So now everybody in Oregon could just type in her name and get her a story. And if you see in the background there, you can see those highlights from, they didn't use color, but they did use my research. Okay, next. She made Wikipedia. I don't know who did that, but they did a pretty good job. They have some odd citations on it. That's my photograph there. It's not cited, of course, but that's her story. Is now international. It's national. It's statewide, and it's growing. Look at all of you. Okay, next. They named a school after her.
Yes.
When we had the opening there, Joey and James, her 2 descendants, were there. David, were you there? David was there. That's where we met. And my great-grandkids were there. They've gotten more history than they're comfortable with.
They weren't very old.
Say what?
Where is it?
It's in Corvallis. And I've got some things here on display that a couple of my books, my degree's in forestry, not local history, but historical ecologist, so I get to do local history. But in between there, 2 or 3 of my books, there are a bunch of books that the grade school students have done about Letitia's life over the last 2 years. The librarian there, I worked with her. She did the writing, the students did the artwork, and then they printed them all up. There's 6 or 7 of them. I think they ought to print them and put them for sale in the museum here. They're, let's see, the next. So that is going on, and one of the things that we're videotaping this, and one of the key reasons is for the kids at Letitia Carson Grade School. This is a 3rd time I've given this presentation since the pandemic, and we tried to videotape the other 2, and they both failed. So 3rd time's a charm is what we're hoping. But this Letitia Carson display premiered here. It was one of the last times I was here. That's Joey Lavadour, her 3rd, 4th, 5th great grandson, and he's next to the Letitia Carson sign. It's traveling around. This is at the Whitman Mission. And I was visiting Joey there, and it was to see the display in Walla Walla to the Metis, which includes a lot of Carson family photographs and history. Joey is one of the key historians to put that together. But this display premiered here in this museum. It's traveled to Corvallis, went to Pendleton. I don't know if it's still at the Whitman Mission, but it just happened to be there when I was visiting, so I made him pose next to the sign. Next. And this is Joy. This is some of the baskets on the left. Her descendants, a lot of them are artists. That's Joey. The 4 paintings are by his brother James, who started Crow's Shadow Art Gallery, the largest Native American art gallery anywhere, I think, out of Pendleton. And his paintings are nationally known. He donated 3 of them, and Joey donated 2 baskets to the opening of the school. That was part of their grand opening. But this is in Walla Walla, and it's open till December 3rd. It's the best local history display I've ever seen. It's the Metis, and it's got the artwork, modern artwork. It's got hundreds of photos. Joey's Aunt Martha, named after her grandmother Martha. Mary Alice's daughter Martha was Joey's favorite. And she wrote a family history in her 80s. He copied it all down. She had a photograph book, and she took photographs. She never had any children, so Joey is kind of a child. And he inherited that photograph book. And the photograph book he gave to the Walla Walla museum, to the researchers there. They blew the photos up. They put them in albums. They've just done a remarkable job. Lots of oral histories with it. And so we can find out all about Letitia's family after they left her. But these are her descendants. They're artists, they're historians. Some of them are very accomplished. They stayed on the lands through the allotments through the 1940s, beginning in really the 1830s. So it's a remarkable story. The next. This is David. David, you want to raise your hand? He's what was Letitia, your 4th great grandmother? 3rd? Third great grandmother. Okay, so here's David and Jeremy Okai Davis, and this is the unveiling of the portrait of Letitia. And I was there to, Gwen Carr made this possible. And when Jeremy and I knew each other through correspondence and phone calls, but when he pointed out Letitia's picture, I'm pretty old, but I teared up. Okay, next. And this is David Stucky. He found out he's the owner. He bought the 12-mile ranch. And half of the 12-mile ranch is Letitia Carson's original land claim. And he just learned about that. So I visited with him when I learned that, and he was different than the previous owner. The previous owner, I found out, was absentee, so the people that we were dealing with or watchmen or something. There's an oak tree that was there when Letitia was there. And that's David, and talking with him, he said he'd like to have a meeting of all the people, have them visit. At first he left it open-ended, and then I warned him about that. So we tried to coordinate with Zachary Stocks at Oregon Black Pioneers, and finally came up June 26th. That would be a good day for everybody to visit. So several of you in the room here were there at that time. It was the first time we'd been on Letitia's homestead and known it as such. It was just a wonderful day, a really good day. Okay, next. There's the viewpoint. So I'm with David, and I'm getting old and soft. I had to like walk away from him. This is her land.
Is that up by the Gary Ann Oak?
Say what?
The oak.
Was that the
huge
Gary
oak.
Ann?
Yeah, white oak. And this is an old Indian prairie, probably Molalla. On the left there, her land went up a little bit on the shelf, but all of the other stuff you can see there is at the picture. If you can see in the middle there, there's a small building. That's right at the mouth of Letitia Creek. Letitia runs through the center of it, and it's beautiful property. Okay, next. So here's David, and I'm describing this picture to Joey Lavadour when I'm visiting him and taking photos there, and then I got touched again. I was just describing it. Just the look on David's face was embodied how I felt when I looked at that land. Okay, next. So to bribe my great-grandkids, this is on Camp 12, we had to do cannonballs in the Myrtle Creek. There's a beautiful swimming hole there. And there's the little baby I was holding. There she is, 9 years old, gained a little weight.
Yeah.
And there's her little brother, my great-grandkids. They've been to every Letitia thing. They weren't interested in visiting her land. They were interested in cannonballing into the creek. The day before we were in Canyonville and we went swimming in the river, they wanted to go back there. They could care less about, okay, next. And this is the new friends of Letitia. You can see a lot of people you know, a lot of people are here. There's David Stucky and David Vincent, and just all of us really. Gwen Carr's in the background, Jan's there. It was a really, really nice day, and everybody thought that. We had a wonderful dinner there, and then next.
They fed us.
The end. Thank you.